they're still talking over there.
Hello, hello. Hi, we're the Paladins art team.
Well, part of them at least.
I guess
Yeah.
we'll just go down the line, kind of introduce everyone, what department they're in.
That's right. I'm Steve. I'm a character.
I'm Sarah. I do rigging.
I'm Brett. I'm part of animation.
Kyle, technical art.
Tina, can you guys go outside?
And I'm Alex. I do environment art. I'm also the guy that built and wears the Bomb King suit in all the cheesy videos.
I'm also Furia.
Yeah, so today we're just going to go through, essentially the process and the whole pipeline from start to finish on how we create both characters and skins, go over some other stuff we work on in the game art-wise, and yeah, we'll go from there.
So starting out, or actually today we're going to go over two different characters. We're going to go over the Ash community skin, and we're going to go through some Tigeron slides as well. I'm going to start out just saying we're a modeling department. I'm a character lead. We do the sculpts, the model, the UVs, the texturing materials. That's all our part of the pipeline. It's probably the longest part of the pipeline, is my guess. It typically takes around a month to get a skin done and around 6 weeks to do a character. They just typically take a lot more work and feedback to get characters right. We like to be a little bit more nitpicky. This round of skins that we have, the community stuff, is really exciting. When I saw the Grover concept, I wanted to make it, so I took time in my schedule to take on that guy because I just liked his wood and whatnot. The Ash also was excellent, and we thought it was a good skin to show off for this. But this is what you would see as far as a sculpt. It's a high poly. You get all the detail you can in there. It's as smooth as possible because you bake this down to a low poly afterwards. Because that high poly will not fit in the game. Your computer can't handle it. So once we bake it onto this guy, we can...
Steve, what is baking?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm just kind of used to just running through it. So baking is you take this low poly mesh and you create a 2D image of it, and then you bake the lighting from the high poly onto the low poly. So that when the lights in the game hit it, there's some fancy math in there, and it knows what the image would look like if it had more polys than it actually does. It's just faking high poly geometry onto a 2D image. So then after that's done, we do a diffuse pass, which is most of our, it's not most of our work, but it's where the biggest bang for your buck goes as far as time. The sculpt takes 2 weeks, and the texturing takes about a week. It's the most important phase, especially using the tech that we're using. You can gloss over a lot of issues with hardware and software through the texturing process, and then let the normal maps do the rest of the image. That's the character side.
So we're just going to essentially rotate through the pipeline so everyone's department can showcase what they're working on.
Hello. So when Steve is done with the model, so this is, let me go over here. So basically we have this little skeleton. When we make a new character, we make this skeleton for the first time, and then every skin after rides the same exact one. That's how we can do skins that all ride the same animation, because they're riding the same skeleton. Just it's basically like putting new clothes on a doll. So here is all of the bones that were added for Squadron Ash. As you can see, there was quite a few. There's 6 for the tail. We had to do override bones for the side plates and override bone for the back tabard over here. I don't know if you can see my mouse. And we had to do new hair bones because it was in a new position. Basically, these bones have a pivot that we put in center of mass. So if it's like a bang of your hair, we'll put it right in the center. But for this skin, it was way out. So if you have it here, it's still going to rotate off this, and it doesn't really function that way because when something bends, it bends in the same exact spot every time. Like your elbow, it can't bend from here, it's going to look broken. So we basically, anytime something is too drastically different, we have to add new bones for animation to touch later on.
Just to jump in real quick, the reason that we add bones is because when Brett goes to animate it, he can't animate it vertex by vertex. It'd take way too long. It's too much work. So what Sarah does is she adds in some very simple geometry that the vertices follow, so that makes it easier for Brett to do his job.
Yes. So I don't have a version, but in the one before, you can see the wireframe. It shows you every square that Steve made for us, and we go through each of those squares. So if it's on your elbow, a piece right here is going to go 50% to your lower arm and 50% to your upper arm. So we do that for every single face on the model. And that is how things move in games, in movies. Anything that is a 3D model has to go through rigging, or you're just going to run around in a T-pose like this the whole time. So here she is with her bones on it, so you can kind of see this is what animation gets. We also not only do characters, we also do, well, for her flag is actually a separate rig. So this is what her flags look like. Again, you can see all the bones, and you can see how it doesn't have to fit the shape of the original. We can always make it work as long as it's roughly in the same spot. And then her weapon is also separate and brought in. So we have a separate weapons modeling team. So Steve's team does the characters. While they're doing the character, another team run by Adam, who, he's not here, they're creating the weapons at the same time. And we get these meshes. So sometimes we'll get a weapon way before we get a character. Sometimes we'll get a character way before the weapon. Who knows what I'm working on each week. These rigs tend to only take like 2 to 5 days, depending on complexity. So I'm working on 2 to 3 at a time, and it changes every week. So I'm probably one of the departments that sees all content has to go through us. And since there's only 2 of us, I pretty much touch half of everything in the game. And yeah, so that is rigging.
Swap here. So when it gets through rigging into the animation department, let's see, which one do we start with? We'll start with this one. So essentially, we already have the base animations done for the character, and what we're doing now is essentially going through and animating all the new features. So out of the community skins, Ash was the heaviest. She had a tail, which requires a lot of work. She had a lot of dangly bits, and especially on the weapon. So like here you can see a comparison for what is base Ash compared to what it looks like on the new skin. So a lot of work went into the tail, and production on skins isn't exactly the same for a skin. Like, so something like Ash takes the team about a week to go through and do, whereas like something more simple like Grover's community skin, the focus on that skin was a lantern, which only takes a few days of people specifically focused on that. So it really depends on what we're getting out of the skin. That determines the amount of work that goes into it. And so we'll go through, and this is that same shot, but with the controllers on the rig. So you can kind of see the new controllers that Sarah gives the animation team in motion. So like we animate the tail, we animate all the dangly bits, and this also gives us an opportunity to, especially going back on older characters, if the base animation needs some cleanup, since we're already working on it, we can go ahead and tweak that. So it gives us a chance to give some old characters some love when they don't have stuff in production, which is really beneficial to us, and I think something the community always likes seeing. So for Ash, it was a very tail-focused week of animating, which is always fun to do just tails. But like this character has bits everywhere. There's dangly bits on the legs. Sarah implements tech that makes the bangs ride the base bang, even though it's not in the same location. So that's really beneficial to the animation team, where we don't have to go in and modify that as much, and lets us put time into focusing on other areas. And then because the weapon has dangly bits on the front of the gun, it also appears in first-person animation. So we also have to go through and, like you can see at the bottom of the gun, because the dangly bits are visible, we then have to go through and animate that. So we're not only going through the third-person animation set, we're also going through the entire first-person animation set and making sure that the new assets on the skin are also modified, and you're essentially getting the love on both versions.
And for that weapon, I actually ended up doing simulation on it to get them a good head start. Basically, I put two little dangly bits that basically I told our program is cloth, so it made them act like cloth, and it got them a good start that they then animated on top of to push it to more of the hand key standard that we have.
So this is one of Ash's emotes on the new Skadron skin, and you can kind of see all the new bits in motion, the hair, the tail, the dangly bits on the weapon, the leg accents. Everything needs to get looked at and touched across every single file for the animation team, so it does take us a while, but in the end, it really helps show off parts of the skin that essentially from concept to animation were the key elements of that, and it works on other skins too, like Grover's Lantern, the star piece on the back of the Community Leon skin. Like, everything gets touched through animation, and it lets us do some really cool things on stuff that already exists.
Just kind of add to that, if we ever think that we want to do a dangly bit or a tail or a cape or anything that doesn't exist on the base model, we have to consider that because it ripples down throughout the teams. Every team has to add on time, so it typically costs more time to do those.
But once it's made, if we decide we want to make it, then that is something that any future skin can use. So it's kind of a,
I think all champions will eventually have tails.
yeah.
I think that's the end goal of
If
the game.
I Love Tails has his way, yes.
It might drive me crazy, but I'm sure it will happen. How did I get here? No?
Did you get what?
That's in the movies. All right. So that kind of wraps up the production for Skadron Ash. Once it goes through animation, we give it to Kyle and Tech Art. He implements it in the game, goes through QA and quality of life passes, and we make sure everything's looking the way we need to. If we need to make any final tweaks before the patch locks, we'll go through and do another pass. Like, for example, on Ash, until we get the skin in-game and see, like, if you start button spamming different directions and you're tweaking the character back and forth, how is the tail going to look jarring between all these different directions? Stuff like that is stuff we'll go back and do another touch-up pass on characters. But yeah, that's mostly the skin pipeline for adding a new skin to an existing character.
So overall, this Ash Squadron probably took, what, a week in concept, 6 in modeling, about a 1 in rigging, and 1 to 2 in animation. So skins take more than 10 weeks, usually. So when people are like, make this skin for next patch, I'm currently working on things for 3 to 4 patches in the future. Like, everyone's like, why didn't you do this? Like, sometimes people are like, why didn't you do a summer skin last summer? Well, that patch was actually made in January, and then we changed patch cycles, so it just happened to not line up anymore. So, yeah, and new characters take even longer, way, way longer, so,
It's
yeah.
kind of interesting because sometimes we'll be in production with a champ or a skin that a fan art has been made for while we're doing it, and it's really odd. It happens way more often than you would think.
So this next part is going to be going over some quality of life updates that we're able to do just through like experimenting and exploration and how we can just make the game better. So Kyle, do you want to drive and show off this stuff?
So this was a little side project that Brett and Kyle had that I helped them implement. This was something the 3 of us just kind of worked on our own, and then when we were asked, like, does anyone have any quality of life things we want to add, it was brought up, and so we've been working to get it implemented in game.
Yep, so this is what a typical mount animation looks like when someone's rolling out of base at the start of every game. It's a little dark up there. So here's some tech that we got in the game. So we're going to be adding mount leans to the game, like you might have seen in Realm Royale. It's similar tech, but we're going to be adding this across all champions, hopefully in patch 1. That's where we're aiming for. Just to give you guys like a scope of how much of a change this is, we have about 45 champions in the game or in production. Each of those champions needed 3 new poses, and each of those poses needed to be applied to 2 different mount types. So that's 270 poses that we've added to the game to make this work. Along with a new IK system to sort of lock characters into their mounts. We got Lex here, to give you a comparison. Here's what Maeve looks like currently in game. And then here's what she's going to be looking like here in the next couple months. as you guys roll out. Forgive the choppiness of the GIF recording software.
So processes like this, like it's something where you're not on the mount a lot in our game. It's not a focus to our game. It's really like the 8 seconds from leaving base till you get to the point. But because of the simplicity of the animation before, it was just a run forward animation. It's stuff like this where we can use near minimal work from the team to add something that does add a nice feel to the game. And even though it's minimal, it's something that we hope the players appreciate and kind of makes it feel like there's a lot more polish into the elements of something as small as running 8 seconds from the base to the point.
Yep. This is something that we started working on back when we released Amani. So we've been working on it for a long time. It took a while to figure out how to implement it correctly, sustainably, and just get all the work in. Brett had to do a lot of work to get all the characters
and
in.
it's cool because this kind of shows the interaction between the projects at Hi-Rez, where like this is something that was implemented in Realm Royale. It existed there. They had figured it out, and they came to us and said, "Hey, we have this stuff that we really think Paladins could benefit from." And so we kind of viewed what they were doing. We looked how they set it up. We had to tweak some things so that it worked with how our game was set up for mounts, but it's inter-department communication like that where we can go to other games and kind of assist each other to get the most out of each project that Hi-Rez is working on.
Yep. I think I might have another section in here with, oh yeah. I was going to go over my trees, I guess.
Sure.
So these aren't specific to Tiberius or anything, but I just want to go over what kind of my work on some of the characters looks like. So this is a template tree. This is where like a lot of our characters start.
Just so you know, this is the step after animation. So this is like how characters know what to do in engine.
Yeah, we give Kyle all the puzzle pieces, and he assembles it together to be what actually functions in the game.
Yeah, so this is a typical tree where they start, and then here's a look at some of like the more complicated trees. Here's what like Rom's tree looks like in game currently. You can see there's a lot more to it. Sort of the way these things work, you read them from right to left, just like my favorite mangas. And all the nodes on the right-hand side are different animations made by Brett or the other animators. And these animations get mixed and matched based on sort of how you guys press the buttons. So when you guys press a button, a programmer kind of opens a valve in the tree, and all the animation math data flows through that valve and combines with other math to kind of create the final product. So if you picture it like a trumpet and someone blowing like an open note on a trumpet, every type of valve he pushes down mixes and matches those sounds, and you finally get the production at the end of the trumpet, and that's what you guys see in game. Yep. And trees can vary a lot in complexity. That's ROM, and you guys can take a look at like Moji's 1P tree, which is really interesting, where we kind of run 2 different heads off of the same tree, which is really fun. Yeah, so that's a really interesting part that I think gets passed over a lot. Yep, that's all I got.
All right, we do an environment next. Alex is going to go over some environment stuff for the game, which is really cool.
Oh, did I close the folder?
I don't think we've shown this stuff anywhere yet, so congratulations, everyone here.
Okay.
Did we go through everything in 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all your stuff. Okay.
All right. Yeah. So, like they're saying, I do environment. Their stuff has been a bit more kind of steps in how you get to an end product. This is more not final, but fairly close to final stuff that we've been working on, kind of since Bazaar got released, focusing on stronger theming for maps and larger kind of shape reads and things like that that kind of are lacking in some of our older maps. And that's been the focus of the environment team kind of since then. So for example, Frog Isle. It's called Frog Isle, and there's one frog on it. Just the one, and he faces away from the map. So the biggest thing that we kind of focused on for that update is adding frogs. So we've kind of gone through and done a pretty significant update on all of our textures and materials for this map. brought in a lot of stuff that we had in later temple-style maps, and added a lot of new custom sculptures, all of which are frogs. Because again, it's Frog Isle, it should have more frogs. So like you can kind of see some of these updates, assuming the image will fully load. Like we've pulled out a lot of iconography that is at odds with the map. So like there's a jaguar head on Frog Isle, why is that not a frog? We've added some props and things, some new stuff and stuff that was pre-existing that was made for the temple sets in Realm Royale, for example, like these banners here. And we've pushed the lighting a little bit further in some places, but that's still kind of one of the last steps that needs to get done is a rework of the lighting on the map to kind of bring that up to current standards. Another shot here of the big frog in the middle, very self-satisfied. Just got all his little frogs down there. Again, once the image fully loads. I saved big images, I'm sorry. So like you can see we've got the frog that looked away is now looking into the map as well too. Like just trying to bring a lot more focus onto having things in the environment that are at player level that they're going to see when they're actually playing the game, as opposed to, you know, if you look out into the skybox, you see something cool, and then you get shot. Stuff that you'll actually see while you're playing is kind of a big focus of ours and has been since Rise of Furia thereabouts. We've kind of put more emphasis on that instead of what you see from a pulled out perspective. Another shot kind of just showing like just the difference in color from the texture update and some of the lighting updates. Like everything is really washed out in blue on the previous map. And just, you don't see a lot of detail. You don't have a lot of focus. Like when you look over here, you can see the capture point from all the way back at this bend, and you can see all the kind of bright emphasis on details that was lost in the original. It was kind of pulled back and flattened. And another shot with yet another frog. Several more, actually, if you can see down in there. There's a, come on.
Paladins has been in dev for a long time, and so the maps were real good in the beginning. They made sense when they were made, but since then, Alex and Rick have learned a ton, and so they're looking back at the old maps and seeing what they could improve for our game.
Mm-hmm. And then speaking of Rick, he's one of our advanced environment artists, and he basically put together this next bit single-handedly, essentially. Like there's use of old assets and things like that to an extent, but the primary work gone into it was entirely his own. And what he's done is update Frozen Guard from being a very simple kind of backwater kind of thing made out of ice, and updated it to a more kind of Viking village-looking setup here, with a much stronger emphasis on architecture and kind of pushing the player's eye around the environment. But again, like using certain pieces that we had before, but like this image I think is one of my favorites because it just shows the stark difference in like, oh, there's some mountains there, I guess I'll push the cart to the mountains, versus like, oh, there's a giant ice cathedral covered in copper and Viking architecture. Maybe I'll push the cart there. You know, just kind of trying to get more interesting forms out of what we have to work on from level design side. Because everything that's here in both Frog Isle and this updated Frozen Guard is still following the exact same level layout that we were given from our designers. It's just interpreting that in a different way to get a lot more visual interest out of the scene. Yeah, so like replacing these kind of sad trees, and I can say that because I made them, with like this, our bear statue that we had in the map that was up on top of a pillar where nobody ever looked at it. Like people that worked on the game were like, when did we make that? It's like, oh, that's been in the game for, you know, years. Have you not seen it? Why not? And it's because it was just way out of play space, way away from what the player can see, and that's something that we want to avoid at all costs moving forward. Is like, we never want to make something cool and then put it somewhere where you don't appreciate it. Another angle here.
It's fun to
And-
watch the environment art get developed because in the character sphere, we have our heads down trying to get something developed. I know where it is basically with rigging, with animation, but then all of a sudden just a huge piece of environment art will come out of nowhere that I didn't know was being worked on, and it looks incredible. So.
Thanks. Much appreciated. So other than Frozen Guard, the one other thing we've got to kind of tease here, oh, there's one more Frozen Guard, sorry. One more good shot of like just seeing the difference in kind of framing these statues. Much the same as the bear statue, there were people that worked on the game that didn't realize that these Viking angel statues were here the whole time. And now that they're framed properly, you can tell from a distance that they're there. Anyway, what I was saying was, other than the Frozen Guard stuff, one other thing that we've got to show you is a sneak peek of what we're working on next. And all of these updates should be rolling out sometime next year in terms of Frog Isle, Frozen Guard. The next one is we're going to update Magistrate's Archives. And we've got some concept art here from Jeff Bellio, one of our concept artists. And the focus is to try and get a bit more like big kind of pointy shapes, get this place feeling like the Magistrate, who are, a little oppressive, a little authoritarian, use red as their main color, actually own this place as opposed to the soft blue palette that was on this place to begin with. So focusing on, again, those pointy shapes, bringing in some reds, some Magistrate symbols in the windows. If you can see here, this is a statue of, maybe someone important to the Magistrate. And you might see that further down the line. And here, the flip side, maybe someone who's less important to the Magistrate now. Kind of in disrepair and whatnot. So we want to bring in larger shapes again to show the player something of interest. In this case, we got a really well-maintained statue of Karn and a really less well-maintained statue of Valera. And the idea that we would have those on either side, and the idea would be that the Magistrates own this place for a while, and they used to care about Valera, but now Karn is the main focus of the group. Trying to get more story and more lore into things as we go. And for example, we're going to replace the telescope with this big abyssal ball that kind of looks like something Ceres has, maybe. Could be something that,
Hint, hint, wink, wink.
some folks might be trying to study, might want power from. And like a kind of a room beneath that kind of controls the ball and kind of is drawing power from something in the center. Just again, really trying to play up the Magistrate own this place, and one person in particular might spend a lot of time here, and trying to work that story and those threads into the environment art, because that's something that we lacked a bit of in the olden days. Is we just kind of made maps to have maps, and now I think we put more emphasis on how that map connects to the characters and the story at large. Some new banners, again, kind of pushing Magistrate, and also some Ceres iconography, some Abyss research, perhaps. And I think that's all I've got in terms of teasers for the environment. I think we're on to more animation stuff.
We already did the trees, right? All right, I'll come back.
It's really nice having Alex and Rick be so dedicated to making our maps look so much better. You can really see their push, like the lore, and just, I don't know, wanted to get more details in there for the players to enjoy.
Thanks.
Yeah, Alex is a big lore nut, so he's in the perfect position to do this.
On this last part, I'll just kind of talk about just some iteration process for how we handle champions. Like we always see the final product coming out, but we never really see what could be or what was at one point and how we determine when to take that out. I'll start with Ram, just since he's already out and people have seen him. Because as an animator, we don't have VFX in our program that we use for animation, we kind of have to figure out on our own like what we want to showcase. So very early on Rom's reload, like we knew we couldn't reload the gun. We wanted to do something cool with him punching a hole through reality and pulling out a new one. So this was like, we originally made a block out where we put some placeholder VFX in for where we imagined stuff would go. We essentially showcased the process of, okay, you could see this and get the full idea of what we were going for in the reload. We'd send it to the VFX team. They'd essentially replace my primitives with actual cool stuff. And then you'd see the final product in game for what it's intended. One of the cool things is like, especially for first-person animation, since we're animating to a specific camera, there's a lot of tricks we can do. Like, for example, punching a hole through reality. His hand actually doesn't really go anywhere. And I'll show you. So like that animation was from the first-person camera, but this is actually what the animation looks like when you look at it at any other angle, which would be wrong. So essentially, the arm's still there, like the gun's hidden off in the middle of nowhere. We just aren't showing it from the perspective of the camera. So it's like tricks like that that we can use that like things are still existing in that scene. We're just showing the player the story we want to show them. And so, like, for example, the arm is still there behind the VFX that takes up a good quarter of your screen, but you still get the feel that it's in-game, he's punching a hole through reality. And it's really cool stuff like that we get to early on in a champion, figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? We'll talk to VFX, we'll talk to design. Does this cause a problem? How can we solve this? Who do we need to talk to? Blah, blah, blah. And over the week, like stuff like this, for example, we'll try and get into play tests right away to make sure, okay, is this going to be jarring? Is this going to block too much of the field? We'll usually try to never block the center of the screen so that players always have their aimer essentially unrestricted and they can see enemies that are directly in front of them. But ROM was just a cool example of, from the very beginning, we were able to do tricks on animation end and VFX end to get a really cool story and probably one of our coolest reloads in the game. But I'm biased because I did it. And then going on to Tiberius, who is still in progress. So all of this is work in progress. It's very subject to change and it's very subject to polish. Since he's still in progress, this is the very early stages of what Tiberius looks like. And so, for example, as we saw on the Scotch and Ash and stuff we had to animate specifically for that skin, that's all labeled as secondary, which is we don't really have to affect the base of the character. And so for any new champion, secondaries like tails, accessories, things like that, we don't animate to the very end because we want to make sure the base of the character reads right, is polished, it feels good, so that we have all of that set for when we want to go and animate the tail so that we know the motion we're doing for the tail. So like, for example, the tail's not going to move here because in this part of the iteration process, we're not far enough to get to the secondary animation. So this shows just some work in progress for some of Tiberius's abilities. Like I said, things are very subject to change, so if you see any weirdness, it's stuff like that we polish out in the very final weeks. But these are also from the very beginning of our animation process. As soon as we get on a champion for the first time, our number one goal is get a block out in for playtest so that players and people on our playtest can get a feel for what an ability is going to feel like, how it's going to behave, what it's going to look like. So that gives audio, VFX, anyone that needs to touch it after us an idea of what's going to be eventually coming to them. So that they can start working on timing, they can start get a general idea for things. So as the animation team goes and polishes, we're not really blocking them on anything or not really going to change anything up. So this is kind of Tiberius doing his abilities and then ulting and doing his modified abilities. And these are a very iterative process, so like things will be polished out, timings will be adjusted, but from an early stage, you can get a gist of what each ability is going to look like, how it's going to feel, how it's going to read to other players looking at Tiberius dashing at you with a giant sword. Is it going to scare the crap out of you? Is it going to feel cool? I mean, we always try and make, especially with Ultimates, a very cinematic feel to things. So especially like spinning through the air with a sword and smashing down feels really awesome. And so we try and get that in early so that when people play it for the first time, they're like, oh my God, I want to do that again. And so, yeah, that's some of Tiberius's in-progress, in-game abilities. I'll also show you, this is all me, or this is some of my work on Tiberius, but like MVP poses we do on Tiberius. Like we get to, one of our limitations for like emotes is we can't do things that might make a player think he's casting an ability or something. Like for IO, we wouldn't be able to do emotes with like Luna because people will think Luna's deployed. But MVPs, because that's purely lobby-based, it allows us to alleviate those restrictions and do cool things. So we can do cool things where he spins a glaive on his finger, has his sword out. We can make sure that we're bringing attention to different things. And then another cool thing is weapon specs is always a favorite of mine. So like these are in-progress things where like one of the cool things we're going to do on Tiberius is normally characters have one weapon in spec. But working with Kyle and setting it up, because Tiberius is a weapon master, he has multiple weapons, we should be able to inspect multiple weapons. So we'll show this other one too. So he has his chakram and his sword, so we're going to be able to let you inspect both of them so you can get a good feel of, especially like when the weapons team does a skin and it's really cool and like you don't want to ult just so you can see the sword. Like we're going to be able to show you the sword while you're not ulting so you can look at your pretty skin that you worked hard to get and appreciate all the artwork that the entire team goes to. And so, yeah, that's just fun stuff that we usually don't do on characters that on Tiberius we're able to do. And then just to show the iteration process, one of Tiberius's emotes, very early on, like this is probably the very first blockout pass, but we needed to get it done so that we knew exactly what props we were going to use. We could send this to the audio team so they knew the timing cues, specifically for like when to drop in the table. They're going to play a sound. When he slaps the cup away, he's going to play a sound. Things like that, so we can send them early so they know exactly what's going to be coming. And then meanwhile, we can polish this, and it's always funny showing the team for the first time and getting a feel of the room of what the reaction is. Does this work? Does this not work? For Tiberius, we wanted a very cat-like emote. So we got to do this and play around with props, but yeah, this just kind of shows the iterative process of what animation looks like early before you see the final polished product.
And fun fact, that table is from the current Magistrate's archives, if you've ever stopped to look into the tiny rooms that you can barely see inside of, that we're going to try and fix.
Is Fernando's mug, or just normal mug, sorry. Normal mug from his emote of when he drinks.
Realm juice.
When he drinks his realm juice, yes.
And that kind of
Drink,
plays into
yes.
other cool things where like I'll message Alex and be like, hey, the animators have a crazy idea. We want Tiberius to slap a cup off a table. Do you have a table we can use? And he'll be like, yeah, go look at these props. These should be what you're looking for. We'll pull from the environment and use stuff that we already have, so this saves modeling from having to create new props and gives animations new tools and toys to play with, which is always fun.
We do have to argue like with design sometimes. Like it'd be really cool if we could summon a table and stuff. We have to balance it against gameplay sometimes.
Yeah, the day we thought of this emote, I went down to Kevin's desk and I was like, hey, are you gonna have a problem if like on an emote I spawn in a table and have Tiberius slap a cup off of it? And Kevin was like, no, I want that. You better give that to me. It's gonna be a thing, so it's fun. It's stuff like that where like it's really fun things we get to show personality off on a character, and it's really fun to work on. And just to give you a perspective, like an emote like this is probably going to take like a week of dedicated work specifically on this one animation to work on. So out of the entire animation kit for Tiberius, we're dedicating a week to one animation. But hopefully the players like it and find it fun, and you get a kill and taunt by slapping a cup on their body.
Yeah.
That's it for me. If anyone... Do we have a part 5?
Yeah. We do QA too.
Oh, character modeling texturing.
Yeah,
You want to switch?
Yeah.
don't want to do QA at all?
We can do it for the last 10 minutes.
Is there any questions y'all have out there? We can do QA if y'all want to. Do we have a mic?
Zach, do we have a mic? Did you already show off this stuff?
Not Tigron, but another one. Sneak a QA in before the end. We have like 10 minutes.
Okay. Does somebody have a question?
With the ears, She has a question.
Did you have a question?
The one with the,
No?
No?
who
Okay.
who else had a question? Someone in the back over there, Zach.
We got a couple there.
We'll do a
There's
quick
couple.
question
We'll
before
get to
Sean.
all of you.
Go, Zach, go.
We have to find a working mic first.
Thunderbrush, everyone.
Yeah. Our art director,
someone
hiding
is-
in the front row.
Pretend he's not here, apparently.
Oh, that's not Thunderbrush. I don't know who that is.
Hi.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, you can hear you.
Okay, cool. So I was wondering, since you guys make such diverse environments and diverse characters, how do you guys kind of make them all look like they fit in the same world? Because that's what got me into Paladins was Realm, and I switched from Apex because I hated the art for it. And I came over, I was like, oh my God, this is so good, so colorful. I see everything. And I got to Paladins, and it's like, these silhouettes are, how? What is this?
Oh, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm just curious, like, how did you guys, do you guys just meet constantly and say, like, nah, this looks a little bit too far out, or is this?
I can speak to character side specifically. Me and the other guys on our team are just real tight friends, and so we're always constantly trying to critique each other's stuff, making sure we're going in the right direction, trying to share tips, and so just as a team, you kind of meld together. But that also extends to the rest of our team, environments, through concepts. We just talk so frequently and so often, we're always giving critique to each other, that we tend to make similar looking things because of that. It's kind of one of a bigger part of being an artist in the industry is just being okay with changing your work based on someone else's input. And so through that process, we have similar looking work.
We
Yeah.
also have art dailies where every morning every artist on Evil Mojo goes into a room and everyone can put art up and we talk about it. So some people will be like, hey, I feel this isn't entirely right, and then we'll talk about why we think it's not right. So every artist, like even me, who technically doesn't do any art, can come in and be like, something about this feels off, let's talk about it. And it's not like, you're not an artist, you can't do that. Because I do that a lot. Oops.
Yeah, and like kind of to that point as well, I would say that there's also just a lot of us have a very particular stylistic sense to ourselves because like we're all on this project together. We've been on it for a while, and we all kind of gravitate towards that same sort of style. So we all already like the big chunky bevels and like low detail textures, not a lot of like grime and high frequency detail and things like that. And then a lot of the time, just that kind of collective enjoyment of that thing, everyone kind of makes stuff that's fairly similar, and it only takes a little push here or there to get it in the right space. For example, like the environment artists, we all have, there's one guy in particular who does phenomenal work for Blizzard, who goes by Orb online. And we jokingly say that it's a requirement on the environment team to have his work open as reference at any given time because he just does big, thick, chunky bevels really, really well because he worked on Here's the Storm, so smaller scale detail. So you have to read it from a long ways away, and we do the same sort of thing even though we are a first-person/third-person game. And so that helps a lot, I think, is having those similar references and inspirations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions down here?
We'll get you next, I promise.
So I just want to know what everybody's favorite skin that you've ever worked on is and why.
That would,
Oh, God, I have
Or
to parse
maybe a
like
few favorites
70.
because I know it's hard to pick one sometimes.
I have to think about that for a minute. There's a lot of them. And they're all so good.
I'm a Grok main, so any Grok skin at all is my favorite skin, as long as he's a damaged Grok.
I'm a Genos main, and I know it's not a full skin, but like the shatter weapons that we created, I got to do like the customized inspects and fires for those. So anytime I play Genos, I love having that one on and just seeing it and feel. And I know it's not a full skin, but it's something, since it's in the first-person camera all the time, I get to enjoy it all the time.
I'm also biased since I rigged Furia. I love all of her skins.
That's a really tough question. I'm not a Victor player, but I did make Full Moon Victor, and I loved making a wolf. But also, I did the new Ruckus and Bolt as well, and it was just such a big project. Get to do metals and then a little gremlin and wood and all that stuff. So really enjoyed that skin.
You can tell we all play a lot.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what mine would be like, because I haven't touched any personally, like I haven't worked on any.
What's your favorite map?
Favorite map, I think, would be Marauder's Port. Like, that was a really fun map to put together. It came together in a bit of a tight time crunch, but I think what we put out looks really fun and really cool. And I got to work on the ship, which was really fun.
That reminds me, I lied. Dredge's gun. Dredge's
That made me
gun.
change my answer too.
Right.
Me and Sarah worked a lot on Dredge's gun, especially to get the organic and mechanical side of that rig working. So like Omega Dredge, the mechanical tentacles that you see on his gun, that was all set up by Sarah so that we could animate the organic side of that gun, and the mechanical side would just work magically because rigging's awesome. So yeah, any dredge work, it was painstaking work for us, and we love it. So
Thanks.
thank you.
Over here, Zach.
She's had her hand up for a while.
Okay. Am I talking you do it right? Am I talking you do it? Okay. First of all, I appreciate all of you.
Thank
So-
you.
Thank you.
And while you guys are revamping maps, do you have any plans on like fixing up older emotes or like MVP poses? Because some of them clip with the newer skins and that kind of stuff. So like, do you have any plans to fix that?
So on the animation side for emotes, like there is a certain point where sometimes, depending on what specific skin, there's usually we'll like when we get a new skin, we'll adjust everything so that it works on both the base and the skin. And we'll try and make sure that if we have to make any cleanups or edits to the base animation, we go through all of the existing skins and make sure it works on that. Eventually, we will reach a point where like there may be one skin that's an outlier, and it kind of determines like how jarring is this for the animation in general on this one specific skin to make the other ones feel less, I guess like there was less care to those ones. So we will absolutely try our best on skins and making sure, like when we do, like for example, the Scotch and Ash, I showed you the emote on there, like we'll try and make sure, like there's one point where, actually I can bring it up again because we have files right here. So like, for example, when the animators did the pass on Scotch and Ash, when she drops the gun behind her, there is about 3 inches of room for her tail to pass through without going straight through the gun. And things like that is like, we'll spend a lot of work in making sure that on this gun specifically, with the tail being a focus, you don't have abnormalities like the tail going straight through the gun. We want the skin to feel good. We want to make it feel like even if this skin was the only Ash thing that existed, the emote would work on that. So we'll edit the base, we'll edit the skin, we'll essentially get it as working as possible, but every now and then we will find like a 1% time where stuff will clip.
And our animation team is also only 5 people, and they're usually working on a new champ, sometimes 2 at once, while also maintaining skins. So if going through rigging usually checks things in editor, and if it's very minor, we will usually send it to the animation lead, and sometimes it's deemed too small to be, like, we just don't have the capacity for it. So if it's small clipping, we can go back, we usually go back and readdress anytime that character gets a skin, but sometimes it's just deemed a little, we just don't have the ability to sometimes.
I will say the majority of us do check Reddit often, and if there is like a very specific one you have in mind that like, this is driving me nuts, like blah, 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 like if someone like brings that up and we see it, then we'll be like, okay, maybe we look at specifically this one in particular and see what we can do about it.
We might not get to it immediately either, but when it fits into our schedule, we'll probably tackle it. So.
We do, I don't do many fixes on clipping, but I do a lot of back-end changes. A lot of the changes I do for our emote and MVP systems, if they're done right, you guys won't notice a difference except consistency. Emotes shouldn't T-pose anymore, and we're doing passes on things like the MVP. So while we can't fix all the clipping, you guys can expect some cool stuff in the future, like maybe Luna or Amani's Dragon showing up in MVPs and emotes. And maybe cooperative emotes if we have the time to do it, like high fives and stuff like that. So
Something we're looking at. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we're gonna try. There's a lot of like design concerns, like if one person cancels the emote, what happens? Blah blah. There's a lot of other things besides just animation and tech side of it that we have to consider. But
Or if we spawn a deployable in-game as an emote, they'll see it and then they'll be like, how'd they spawn their dragon? So there's a lot of design concerns, so we may not be able to do certain things if we get hit with a no by the Kevins.
we will
Nah, I'll
definitely
do it.
try because
I'm gonna do it anyway.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it anyway.
The Kevins.
Because like as a team, we'll be like,
Sitting
hey,
right next to each other.
we'll be like, hey, this idea is cool. Can we try this? And yeah, we'll try it. And if it works, we'll go forward with it. And if it doesn't, we'll reevaluate.
I just have one more question, and
Sure.
it's I've noticed that you guys have been releasing gold skins for some of the older characters that like just had a weapon. Are you gonna keep doing that, like for earlier ones that only got a weapon that need like a full skin?
Yeah, we'll keep releasing this.
I love the gold skins; they're like my favorite.
Excellent.
Yeah, those gold skins are tied to our PC ACC combine. Since that system is dead, before a character was calling 2 different packages, so it was being more taxing on your computer. We're moving anything related to that ACC into the character package, so it's less intensive for you. It's something Kyle and we try to do 1 to 2 a patch. And when we usually do that is we usually do those 1 or 2 characters, that's their gold skins. So you can kind of buy just what characters have gold skins. Those are also characters that we've gone through and combined as well.
We're coming up on an hour, so we'll try and get a few more questions in. Oh yeah, let's go down here. Okay.
Hi, I'm an artist, graduate from SCAD, and I was wondering, for the environments that aren't right now in the rework pipeline, what would you say your least favorite is and why?
That's a good question.
Having them judge our own work.
Probably something like ice mines, maybe, especially seeing what Rick's done with Frozen Guard. Like, seeing what it could be makes what it is a little sadder to me. Personally, I don't like Bright Marsh, but that's mostly because I had to optimize it, and it was the hardest map we had to optimize because of all the windows. But visually, I like Bright Marsh. Ice Mines visually is the one that I think I would want to rework the most.
I think y'all could do some work on Jack Falls, too.
That's true. That's
Do we-
true. We got a little bit of that set up already. Just need to get all of that finished through the pipeline. Magistrates comes first, though.
Do we have time for one more question?
How do you make the characters move?
She's
So-
she's more wondering what like programming. She's wanting to get into animation, and we don't have we're in a very rural school district, so they don't have like anything in that kind of aspect. So we're trying to figure out something to get her so that she can start messing around with that stuff.
So in short, we use 3ds Max on Paladins. The other alternative is Maya. They're both Autodesk programs. They're both very good. Depending on what game studio will determine what you want to use. But for how we specifically make them move, where is your rigging ones? Ash? Yeah. Okay. So essentially, rigging will give us a skeleton, which is essentially like a puppet system, and so we'll specifically click on segments of this skeleton and translate them, rotate them, set keys, and this is what we're actually controlling to puppeteer the mesh to move in essentially everything that has animation on it.
And 3ds Max and Maya, both Autodesk products, have a 3-year educational version. As long as you do not create something that goes into a game that makes money, pretty much anyone can actually download those educational versions, and you can access the whole program. They don't limit you. It's just anytime you open it, the file says this file was made with the student edition. And there are also free options such as Blender. It is an open source version of Maya, basically, but it is not very supported widespread through the games industry. I don't know when or if it will, but it is a free option that will get you the same like idea, and then at that point, once you know how to do it, it's just kind of switching programs is more just kind of learning, like, it's not like learning how to ride a bike, it's kind of like just switching to a different sized bike.
And so the animation team will work entirely in 3ds Max with the rig systems from there, and then we send the files to Kyle on TechArt, who then exports them into the game engine and assembles them.
I will say, you should probably be able to find some good tutorials on YouTube as far as getting started. Just try, there's got to be a ton of them. So just try to find one that starts super basic with the program that you want to use and go from there, I would say.
YouTube's your best
Thank
friend,
you.
so is Google.
Yes. I think that was everything. Yeah. All right, just going through again, I'm
Malloy.
Brett from animation.
Sarah from rigging.
I'm Steve, do character work.
I'm Alex from environment.
Kyle from TechArt.
And we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys
Thank
for
you.
being here and listening
Thanks
to
for
us
coming.
today.